to IEP Radio, a show dedicated to the education of all things indoor environmental quality related. And now here's your host, Michael Schranz.
Welcome to IEP Radio. This is episode 35. I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Joe Lstiburek, one of the most influential voices in the world of building science. Joe is the founding principal of Building Science Corporation and buildingscience.com, a distinguished engineer, educator, and internationally recognized expert on moisture control, indoor air quality, and building performance. With degrees in engineering and a PhD in building science, he has shaped building codes and industry practices across the globe, taught thousands of professionals, and even earned the Wall Street Journal's moniker as the Dean of North American Building Science. Today, we get to learn from his unparalleled insight into how buildings work, fail, and perform at their best. And I want to warn you in advance, we have a real talk. So if you have kids around, go put them in the other room right now, because this man with over 50 years of experience holds nothing back. Buckle up. Here we go. Joe, welcome to the show.
It's an honor and a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Same here. This is a highly anticipated podcast that I've been wanting to do for a long time. I've known about you for many years. In fact, many of the resources that I've learned or attempted to learn of anything building science related was actually pulled from your website, buildingscience.com. And I never really knew the man behind the curtain. But as I peeled that onion and the layers back, I realized that you were very much a big part of it. And I felt naive. I felt dumb because I didn't realize how much of a positive influence you've had pretty much everywhere in the world, but certainly here in the States. So thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you for saying those nice words. I want to point out that I was adopted as a young punk kid by the legends, and I didn't make up this stuff. It didn't come from me. It came from them, and I learned with their wicked humor and stories. They sent me to Cleveland to look at peeling paint just because they thought I should have some fun in Cleveland. And anyway, and so they adopted me. And it's important that people realize that all of the stuff that I've talked about, almost all of it I was taught by legends. And so I might put things together in a little more entertaining way, but I didn't invent the second law of thermodynamics. We got, William Thomson, a crazy Irish guy living in Scotland that Queen Victoria made a Lord Kelvin. All right. So thank you, but I just tell stories.
That's fine. And you're good at it. I've taken one of your recent fundamentals course, and the way that you deliver your knowledge, if people aren't signing up left and right for that, they're missing out, because you give away stuff that's worth thousands upon thousands of dollars, if not more. But there is an elephant in my room, probably going to be the most important thing of our podcast. And that is something that's been bugging me for quite a while. And that's your last name. When I look at your last name, as a C plus B minus English graduate, I want to say Lstibruek, and I know that's not how you say your name. I think it's pronounced Lstibruek. But what's the story with the name? Can you educate us less educated?
All right. Well, so it's pronounced Lstibruek, and it's of Czech heritage from the Czech Republic, but I'm not from there anymore. I'm a canceled Czech.
Uh-oh.
Okay, that was funny. Come on, that, canceled Czech. And then when I dance, I'm
a Czech.
When I dance, I'm a bounced Czech. I mean,
okay, yeah.
Just letting you know that's. But yeah, I was born in Toronto, Canada, and of immigrant parents, and my dad was a fighter pilot during the war and a war hero, and he ended up running the engineering department at de Havilland Aircraft. So I grew up around planes. So all I ever wanted to do in life was to be a pilot. But my eyesight was so bad I couldn't fly. I couldn't get a license. So I figured if I couldn't fly them, I would design them. So my undergrad is in aerospace, and I'm an aerodynamicist. And And so when somebody says it's not rocket science, I can actually comment because I was a rocket scientist. But when I graduated, I couldn't get a job. And so I ended up
You
at
mean it wasn't an attractive field, okay, or background, a degree?
well, we were in a recession in Canada and also in the United States. And so the only job I could get was as a laborer on a construction site. And so, which was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I was one of the few people that could read and write English and could look at drawings and recognize them. And I started asking questions. Well, why do you do that and whatever? And the people that were first taught me were the building officials. And so people hate building officials. I love them. They it took me, a young punk kid wants to know stuff and isn't arguing with the building officials and wants to know. And so they started teaching me. And then they said, my questions began to get more complicated. And then they said, you need to go to Ottawa, National Research Council of Canada. And so I would start, driving 5.5 hours from my mother's basement to the National Research Council in Ottawa and for the coffee breaks on Wednesday. And they figured out that, oh my God, this punk kid was driving 5 hours for 20 minutes sharing coffee. And so then they would, oh, stay for the day. And I got adopted, and that's where I met the big time legends. And so I never forgot that. They're all passed away now, and I've become the old guy. But it was very impressive for a youngster to be taught by people and have the knowledge shared by people with more experience and knowledge. And they loved it because you're respectful and you wanted to learn, and they had a sense of humor. And so now it's my turn. I owe them because they adopted me.
Yeah. Yeah, and it feels like a lot of guys in my industry, we're lucky to have everyone has an opportunity or opportunities in life, and they'll have a mentor. And we were talking a little bit offline about a couple things, one of which are like having a mentor in your life and really recognizing and honoring what they've done, which you've from the first time that I really got to meet you, you've always been very respectful and honoring of humbling of where your beginnings were and where you were able to step on the shoulders of giants and any other analogy. Um, it is something that is one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on here is because some of the greats that you mentioned who I didn't even know until learning it from you, this is a dying bit of industry, and I used the term earlier, it's not sexy, it's not attractive, but yet it's so important. I have clients every day asking me about the things that we're about to get into. So I'm really excited to do that. I know that folks listening and watching know that today's podcast is titled "There's No Free Thermodynamic Lunch," and this idea is like, what the heck are we going to be talking about? And I think the thing that we're going to really be focusing on are consequences of building practices and building codes and getting through the issue of why do we keep having quote unquote problems, trying to do our best to define it, of course, in these buildings. Because I talk with people, what I do normally for a living is dealing with microbial exposures and chemical exposures. And, it's easier if it's like a fenestration issue, like, oh, look, this could have been flashed easier or better and it failed. But there's bigger issues. We've seen whole house building defects, a house that's blueprints came from one climate or one zone being installed in another climate where it can't handle it. So these are one of those things where if we let this recording run, we probably would record something for over 1,000 hours. But today, what I wanted to talk about with Joe is a couple of low-hanging fruits. So
Well, let me explain why I said there's no such thing as a free thermodynamic lunch. Thermodynamics is all about energy. And here's why it's such a big deal in buildings. We've dramatically changed the energy flow from the inside out and the outside in the last half century in the United States and Canada. And there are consequences for that.
I know what you mean, but for the audience, what do you mean by we've changed it?
Well, we insulated up the yin yang wazoo. Those are metric terms. One yin yang is two wazoos.
That's pretty, yeah, yeah.
Just letting you know. So let me explain why I'm 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 such a famous guy. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. I said it's okay for things to get wet if they dry.
Hmm.
Whoa. I mean, that's genius right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wetting followed by drying is okay. Now, here's the key. Drying requires an exchange of energy. And so what have we done to the drying potential? We've dramatically reduced the drying potential. So when things get wet, they stay wet longer. And so in order to stay in thermodynamic equilibrium, you have to reduce the wetting potential to stay in balance with the drying potential. And so I said, there's no such thing as a free thermodynamic lunch. And I point out that that was put to music by the second best guitarist of all time, Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits. You can't get your money for nothing and your chicks for free. You can't insulate up to yin yang wazoo and just forget about it. And what's happening is that if you can't do math or physics, you become an activist, right? And so we've got all these people telling us that we have to go to net zero. We've got to, change the building materials that we're using with. And I'm saying, yeah, I don't have a problem with it, but you don't understand. You just can't do that without also doing all of these other things.
Yes.
And those other things are not easy. And hence, you can't get your money for nothing and your chicks for free. Now, do I believe that it should be done? Absolutely. Are you kidding me? I'm okay. I'm an engineer 3 times over. I'm born with a genetic defect. It's the efficiency gene. I can't help myself. So I want to be efficient, but I'm old. So I know there are consequences for efficiency. So I want to stay out of trouble. So if I'm going to double and triple my insulation values in my attic, I have to reduce by a third or more the wetting of the attic. Duh.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's not complicated. Also, people don't understand that the materials we use today are not the same as the materials we used to use way back when.
Give me a couple examples.
Well, youngsters are flabbergasted when I tell them we used to go to forests and cut trees down and cut them into boards and build boats out of them and sail them around the world. Try doing that with a sheet of OSB. I call OSB the spam of wood. I call spam the OSB of luncheon meats. Are you freaking kidding me? I mean, so you're telling me that,
Yeah.
you know, you're gonna, I view engineered wood as an insult to wood and engineers. Now, are we going to go back to building out 1,000-year-old trees and rocks? And the answer is, well, no. So we have to come to terms with the fact that not only is the energy change different, but the durability of the materials is dramatically altered.
Yeah.
We have to be much better. You think about this. We used to line the inside of our buildings with plaster.
Hmm.
Now we line it with paper-faced gypsum board. We're building paper buildings. Even the dumbest of the three little pigs didn't build their house out of paper. So let's build our house with paper and waswood and insulate up the yin yang wazoo and pretend like nothing, nothing, nothing needs to be done.
Right.
Now, with a clean sheet of paper in a new building, we actually know how to do that. But do you have any idea how difficult it is to take a 30, 50, 100-year-old building and say, we're going to make it net zero?
Yes. To update that and make it retrofit it to today's standards or codes.
And I'm going to say sometimes we're going to say, let's just pay the energy bill because it's a beautiful building.
Yeah. Right. Because
There's
that
some,
that was a big focus is the carbon footprint, the zero thing is it's very attractive. Like, yeah, let's save energy, and I'm all for it, but I feel like it's lopsided with the consequences that are not being realized. I think one of your big points that you're going to make throughout our conversation today is we're not taking it. Take, for example, this, hear me out. So insulating and venting roofs incorrectly. A lot of issues that I see in homes are due to some sort of roofing issue. And we see it a lot. We see it in cold climates where we're having condensation issues and other factors. What's going wrong with this? Why can't we get roofing and venting right?
well, we actually can get it right, but things have to become unacceptably bad before we change.
Uh-huh.
Things get intolerably bad and then we change. We're not proactive, we're reactive.
Mhm.
And my argument is that also stupid should hurt, but it should hurt quickly. So when you're a kid and you put your hand on the stove, ow, you know,
Hurt.
dumb. But if you put your hand on the stove and it doesn't hurt for 8 to 10 years, so we would do stupid stuff, and the damage took 8 to 10 to 15 years to manifest itself. Well, the good news is that we've gotten so bad that the time frame between the stupid action and the consequences is shrinking, and it gets even better. We have one of the most effective technology transfer mechanisms on the planet working in the United States. It's called the legal profession and lawyers. Nothing like lawsuits and class actions to basically teach fundamental building science. You, you're never going to hear this on any other podcast, but you're saying lawyers are having a good role in this because they're suing everybody, and that's yeah, it's more effective to be sued and then change your practice than to actually pretend like you actually paid attention during your architectural undergraduate or your engineering undergraduate. I it it, it it's
You're right. People go the path of least resistance, and if it's not a hot stove that you put your hand on and you react immediately, people are going to say, "Well, it must be okay." And we deal with this in facets of chronic illness and low dose exposure concerns that are not some sort of thing that you can answer with a NIOSH, a TLV or something like that. It's tough to deal with that. Let's talk about a few low-hanging examples then. Earlier I had talked about, I know we got a few on our schedule. We talked about, or I brought up the idea of roofing assemblies and venting versus non-venting and the insulation. There seems to be a huge debate between some people that are like proactive vent only, which I tend to find myself in that category. And then there's other people that like absolutely do not vent. That's a horrible idea. And when you have too many talking celebrity heads that sound like they know what they're talking about, it can be overwhelming for many. I'm hoping, Joe, that you can shed some light on that topic.
well, okay. Venting to control moisture in a well-insulated assembly is a really dumb idea.
Okay.
So let me explain.
Yeah.
In the old days, when my Toronto Maple Leafs were winning Stanley Cups in the 50s and 60s, um, the attic in a cold climate was roughly halfway in temperature between the inside and the outside, right?
Yeah.
So your house is heated, you didn't have a lot of insulation, and moisture from the house would get into the attic. Now, outside air in the winter is cold. You can actually look this up, even in Harvard, at the Harvard Public School of Health,
Unbelievable.
actually learning that. So outside air is cold, and cold air can't pick up moisture. So you bring cold, dry air into an attic that doesn't have much insulation. The escaping heat from the house gives that air the ability to pick up moisture, and it picks it up and carries it to the outside. So attic ventilation in a poorly insulated attic in a cold climate dries the attic. Woo-hoo. Well, what did we do? We doubled and tripled the amount of thermal resistance in the attic.
Right. I want my house. I don't want to have a big utility bill.
And so guess what? So the outside air that's cold that can't hold moisture is brought in, and what happens is that it stays cold. And so if there's moisture from the house, that moisture isn't picked up. So then the roof's rotted. And so again, we pioneered this in Canada in 1982 and 1983. We rotted thousands upon thousands of attics. We insulated them under something called CHIP, the Canadian Home Insulation Program.
Was there
And
going to be a quiz later? Because if I need to.
no, no, no.
Okay. All right. All right.
But what's interesting is that they saved energy, but we didn't stop the moisture.
Right.
So they all rotted. And so uh, we exported that technology to the United States to get even for the Wayne Gretzky trade. You got our best hockey player. We thought we would rot out your houses.
Doesn't feel fair, but okay.
Okay, so then what happened? Well, you had to prevent the moisture from the house from getting into the attic. So we air sealed the attics, the ceilings. So
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
what that did was is it interfered with the ability for the oil furnaces and the oil chimneys to vent products of combustion. We began to get spillage and backdrafting of the products of combustion, and people began to get sick and die. And so, oh my God, what do we have to do? Then we had to figure out that you needed combustion air. We needed to go to sealed combustion appliances, and
Hmm.
I think we've kind of figured that out. But it took 20 years. And then what did we do? Well, we want to insulate our walls too. Well, all right, well, let's insulate the walls. Well, when we insulated the walls, the paint all fell off them. Huh? What? Well, walls get wet from the outside, right? It rains and whatever, and the water gets into the laps of the siding because of capillarity, but because the walls are uninsulated, the heat from the building causes that to dry, and so no big deal.
Right.
So we blew the cavities with cellulose and fiberglass, and we saved energy, and all of a sudden all the paint fell off. And what did we have to do? Well, we had to get vapor permeable paint, right? We had to change
Mhm.
the types. We had to put a small airspace between the siding and the cladding and the wall, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, all right. So we figured out how to do this, but what taught us? Failure.
Failure.
You see, what happens is when you're successful, you don't always know why you're successful. But when you have a failure, you actually learn more from a failure if you evaluate it. And so, are you ready for a bad joke?
Yes, go for it.
Failure has made me the man that I am today. Now,
Yeah.
you shouldn't do the same stupid thing twice. Okay, that you should make new mistakes, not repeat the same ones over
Yeah. Right.
and over again. And so the biggest evolutionary change and dy driving force for improved construction has been failure. Failure is more educational than success if you analyze it and learn from it. And the trouble is that sometimes it's difficult to share the lessons of the failure because you're not allowed to talk about it.
So,
And
so
so
Joe, question about the wall.
yes,
So I know what's tricky about this is that when someone asks me, so what's the proper way to do it? I usually answer with, it depends. And I know that there's no way that we can have, maybe we could with the formula, but we don't have a way to say that this building assembly, this wall assembly is appropriate for all climates. Maybe there's some
actually,
that are ideal.
no, we actually do.
Okay, that's where I'm leading to is can you explain
Sure,
some
it's
secret sauce, some formulas, some best practices?
really easy. I wrote a paper called The Perfect Wall. And so I'm being given credit for developing the perfect wall. You have to ask me, well, Joe, where'd you get the idea for the perfect wall?
Joe, where did you get the idea for the perfect wall?
I stole it from one of my mentors. They wrote it in something called a book, which was found in a library and was in black and white. And all I did was take a black and white 1950 sketch figured out before I was born. I added color to it and gave it a clever name and called it the perfect wall. And it works in every climate zone on the planet. So this is really embarrassing. So I say if you actually don't ever want to do a calculation and you actually don't ever really want to pay attention, you put your water and air control layer and vapor control layer on the outside of your structure. And then you put all of the insulation on the outside of the water, air, and vapor control layer. And then you have your cladding and you back ventilate and drain your cladding. And that will work in Miami and Montreal, Memphis and Minneapolis, and
But wait, Joe, let me be the guy that gets to put his foot in his mouth. I'm hearing a person say, "Won't if I'm in a cold climate, won't I somehow trap moisture coming from the inside of the house to the outside with this perfect assembly?" What is it about that makes this so versatile?
well, okay, so that bold line on the outside of the structure is an air barrier and vapor barrier and water barrier.
Uh-oh, but doesn't barrier mean that stuff can't get through it?
Exactly. And so guess what? So what's the temperature of that wall? It's always the
Temperature
temperature
of the.
of the inside.
Yep.
Always. And it doesn't matter whether you're in Miami or whether you're in
Right.
Montreal.
That's the envelope right there.
Okay. So guess what? You're not going to get condensation on that black line because it's warm because of all of the insulation to the outside of it, right?
Which is the blue line for those of us who are.
Well, yeah, the dark
Yeah.
blue line,
Yeah.
right? So this will work in the winter everywhere.
Yeah.
If
Okay.
you were stupid and you wanted to build an indoor swimming pool attached to an art gallery that's pressurized, humidified with a hospital, this is the perfect wall in a cold climate, right?
Yeah.
So let's move it to Miami.
Yeah, I was going to say, now I hear the other argument. Your
Oh, no,
control layer is going to get moldy.
no, it's not going to get moldy. It's
Here we go.
freaking warm. Give me a break. Now, let's go to Miami. And the moisture flow is always from warm to cold,
Right.
right? So it's going from the outside in.
Right.
Going to blow through the cladding system like shit through a goose. It's going to blow through the airspace. It's going to blow through the insulation. It's going to hit that black line, and it's going to change its phase from a vapor to a
Liquid.
liquid. And then what are we going to do with it? We
We got
drain.
to drain out of the house. I don't want it to touch the house.
Done. So guess what? This works in Miami and Key West, and it freaking works in Montreal. It works in Memphis. It works everywhere. And the only argument we might have is how much insulation do we really need? And can I tell you what my answer is?
Yes, sir.
Whatever you think it is, double it and shut up. Because
Oh boy, the energy folks. or the,
look, I've been doing this forever. And every time I thought I had the optimal thickness of thermal resistance, 10 years would go by and I would say, oh man, I should have increased it.
wasn't your house like doubled or tripled or something like that?
Well, I've been renovating my house for 35 years, okay? And it's not my house, it's the house I share with a woman architect that I adore.
Oh, your beautiful bride. Okay.
And uh, and so our our current thermal resistance is R35, but I only had 2 inches of rigid insulation on the outside when I reclad it. I should have put 6 inches of rigid insulation on the outside. But I didn't know at the time. I know now. But anyway, so I'm ultra conservative in terms of thermal performance, and I more is better.
I was
Now,
going to say because in going back to the energy flow decreasing with the way we're building things today, you tried to add one of the ways to add a buffer or to adapt to that is by increasing that R value to even further minimize that something's going to reach the dew point.
right, so it doesn't get wet. Now, here's the other point of all of that, and that is everything from that black line in is inside.
Yeah.
And if you don't do stupid stuff to the inside, like over humidify it or whatever, it's happy. Instant threatening. And that black line, everything to the outside, you want to drain or whatever, and it'll dry and call it a day.
Yeah.
And it's in every climate zone, everywhere. Now, can I tell you what the arguments are?
Please.
I don't like the insulation you chose. I don't like expanded polystyrene. I don't like extruded
Yeah.
polystyrene. I don't like
Yeah.
foil face. Use Gloria Vanderbilt's blue jeans with borates. They freaking work. Use fiberboard. Use rockwool. In other words, all of the insulation systems can be made to work as long as you get that order. And
Yeah.
for a really bad joke, you can pick your teeth, pick your nose, pick your butt, but the order matters. You can have your
Right.
water control, your air control, your vapor control, and your thermal, but the order matters.
Right.
Always want the water and air control on the structure and everything else to the outside of that. I got news for you. Water control is way more important than air control. I've been doing this for over a half century, and I've never gotten a call in the middle of the night saying, my building is leaking air. My building is leaking air. But man, oh man, your building is leaking water. They're gonna hunt you down and find
Oh,
you
well said. Well said.
wherever you are.
Yeah.
Now, so your water control and air control are a big deal. Now, in terms of vapor control, I mean, here's what we've learned, and this is controversial. When I say what we've learned, what the old timers taught me, and I'm translating it as you're better off not having a vapor barrier than having one in the wrong place.
Hmm.
Let me repeat, you're better off not having one than having one in the wrong place. Now, having one in the right place is better than not having one, but having one in the right place usually isn't going to win or lose what's going on. You win or lose with the water and the air. And, that I, I'm smiling and laughing because I'm sounding like Professor Handegord and Professor Timisk and, Dr. Gatley and all of the Mark Baumberg. We call him Doctor because he has two PhDs. Oh my God. I've become them with a wicked sense of humor that comes
Right.
from coffee.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense, right? If you put those barriers in the wrong location, problems are going to happen. And I'd rather you have a house that you might have to spend a little bit more utility bill than face the consequences of the former.
Okay, now here's where we get into trouble. Okay. You have an old historic building in Washington, D.C., or Philadelphia, or New York, or whatever, and you want to make it net zero. Where should you insulate it? On
On
the
the outside,
whose head explodes?
people have to pay for it, and the people who want to make it a historic building stay a historic building.
The historic people.
Yeah, right.
I call them the hysterical consultants. And
Yeah.
the point is that sometimes I tell them, we can't save energy in this building because you want it to last a long time. The only way to keep it lasting a long time is to actually keep having the energy go across it. Whoa, 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 whoa. And I'm saying, look, if you reduce the drying potential, you have to reduce the wetting potential. And the big wetting potential has always been rainwater in a mass wall. So you're going to have to put drips and flashing and whatever, and they get all freaked out over that. And then I kind of smile. Notre Dame, there's a Notre Dame in Quebec, the province of Quebec. Well, they they insulated it. They had to change and add all these flashings in order to keep it from falling apart. You can't get your money for nothing and your chicks for free. And so the idea is that if you're going to change an existing building that has meaning to us, from to society to whatever, and I love old buildings that are.
Yeah, sure, sure.
And so you have to be very careful with how you change them because you don't want to destroy them. And
Yeah.
sometimes you should just suck it up, young grasshopper, and pay the energy bill because that's what has kept it up for all of these years. Now,
Right.
now I can do some things that are understated. In other words, that you'd have to be really looking carefully to know that I was there. And then I also say that all of these things have to be reversible. So in other words, that if I turned out to make a mistake and I was wrong, I need to be able to get rid of that stuff in such a way that it didn't hurt the building to begin with. In other words,
Right, exactly. Yeah.
you want to change things in an understated way, and you want to make those changes reversible in a manner that didn't lead to permanent damage. And
So with the
if you think that's easy, you have no freaking idea. And I'm telling you, you know, it's easy to have net zero with the clean sheet of paper, but
Yeah, right.
for a bunch of activists to say all of the houses in Denver have to and buildings need to be net zero by 2050, they have no freaking idea. They have no idea
Right.
what that's going to take.
Yes. Do you find yourself on building designs where, like we talked about, that control layer and insulating it in the in that order, the right order, but still having some buffer to where, because we know things are built by man, and so let's say the control barrier isn't installed perfectly, or there's a gap, there's a hole, is that we're still being conscious about the permeability of the materials that work our way into the wall, into the home itself.
Well, believe it or not, you always assume that you're never going to be perfect. And I'm not as anti impermeability as people are saying. I'm getting tired of buildings that got to breathe. Give me a break. And we can have vapor barriers in assemblies that don't breathe, but you can have them breathe and dry from that layer out, and breathe and dry from that layer in. And sometimes you actually want that layer not to breathe. And the problem is that we have activists and members of cults that pronounce themselves to know all of this stuff, and they don't understand. Well, no, it's okay. Now, where you worry about things that are completely vapor open in both directions is if you have what we call a reservoir cladding, like brick or stucco.
Yeah.
So it rains on the brick and the brick gets wet because it's a sponge. Then what happens? Well, the sun beats down on the brick and elevates the temperature of the water, and the water vapor is driven what?
Inward.
Inward, like shit through a goose. So, putting 60 perm Tyvek behind a brick veneer is kind of stupid, isn't it? But it's okay if you put the 60 perm Tyvek over OSB, because OSB is, 1 to 5 perms. So you actually, what's saving us is the OSB providing being a vapor throttle, right? So putting Tyvek over gypsum board sheathing, which is, 25 to 35 perms with brick veneer, that would be really colossally stupid, wouldn't it? You'd want,
Is the OSB a reservoir or a pathway for it to then go a different direction?
no, it's a bear, it slows it down.
Yeah, it retards it.
Yeah. And like big time.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
that allows the other building materials to handle it.
right.
Yeah. There's
Now, okay, so um, well, what if I then, put a rigid insulation on the outside of that doesn't breathe, like maybe 2 inches of extruded polystyrene? Well, that's awesome because the moisture will be driven out of the brick and condense on the outside of the extruded polystyrene and drain. Well, what about moisture from the inside? Well, if it passes through that water control layer, you have grooves. That's a 60s technology. It's groovy. You have
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Heck yeah.
grooves in the rigid insulation that provide drainage, and so you can actually have moisture pass through and then drain. So there is all kinds of options
Yes.
that you have available to you that we don't teach architects, engineers, contractors at all. I'm like,
Does
you're
the perfect wall meet those the net zero proponents? Like, this has got to be so passive and perfect. Do you think it fills within that? Would it satisfy their requirements, or is it still?
absolutely, it does. Then you could have variations of the perfect wall. Well, like what? Well, let's say that I've got 2 stud walls, and I'm in Germany. I can put the water control and vapor control layer on the outside sheathing of the inner wall.
Okay.
And then I can have all kinds of fluffy stuff in most of the rigid insulation on the outside of that. So the perfect wall principle works for a double wall, right?
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
Joe.
Gee, oh, okay.
Yeah.
We can make it work with all of these various materials. And if you can only use wood, okay. You can only use blue jelly beans. I will make it work for you because we call these people clients.
Mhm.
Client wants me to use blue jelly beans. I'm going to make it. And I've had some pretty interesting clients, some of which launch things into outer space.
Mm-hmm.
And they're kind of nice people. I know it's hard to believe. And what happens is that a lot of the people that surround them are terrified of them. What's nice about some of those folks is that they do want to do the right thing. And sometimes you can convince them into doing something in the right way to actually push the technology, because they're part of the small group of people that actually have the resources to push the technology. And if we fail, we can fix it. And if we succeed, we share it. And believe it or not, a lot of them like that, and I like them because they. So yeah, it's sometimes easier to work with them than to work with a research department at a national lab.
Oh, good grief.
Just
Talk about red tape.
just
Earlier, we were talking, or we just glanced over ventilation, and one of the things that you and I were talking about earlier was incorrect ventilation. So this word ventilation is a big word used in our community, right? When we think about ventilation, it's all sorts of things that people will tag it with: exhaust fan ventilation, hood range, mechanical ventilation, natural ventilation, infiltration, things of that nature. Where are you seeing ventilation? First of all, how are you defining it? And second of all, where are you seeing it being done incorrectly?
I'm seeing it being done incorrectly almost everywhere, and the reason is that I I've become famous for a quote that I stole from somebody else that was actually more famous than me, but they're dead now. I said, dilution is not the solution to indoor pollution. Source control is. And um, the ability to ventilate out contaminants in a space is not very effective. It's incredibly poor. And so the best approach is to not have the bad stuff in the space to begin with.
Here's your number one.
It's called source control. Not do stupid stuff in the space that creates contaminants. That's source uh, control. And not change the environment in that space to create contaminants in the space. And it's also called source control. And the problem is that we think that we can dilute the contaminants out, and I'm the the numbers that I'm going to share with you stuff that's really old, but people think that it's really new. So um, in the 1980s, the late 1980s, uh, Quebec Hydro measured 500 houses under their energy conservation program. They measured them for formaldehyde.
Mm.
They did tracer gas testing, and so they said, what's the tightness of the building with a tracer gas evaluation, and let's then track what the formaldehyde levels were. And they found, wait for it, there is no correlation between air change and formaldehyde levels.
No dilution in the numbers, huh?
No, let me explain why. You're going to like roll your eyes at me and may never talk to me again, but
Oh, that's definitely what's going to happen.
That's because the source strengths were not constant. They're all over the freaking place.
Oh, so they didn't even have controls in place. Okay.
Well, no, it's not they didn't have controls in place.
No, the products are not stable.
You have 500 houses and you have 500 different source strengths.
Yeah.
So if you're ventilating at a certain amount, there's going to be no correlation between the contaminant and the ventilation rate because the source strength is all over the place. Okay? Now, they basically said, well, what we need to do is we need to be ultra careful here and just make sure that, 90% of the people have lower concentrations than a certain level. The problem is nobody could agree what that level was, right?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Sure.
No. Oh, okay. So I was exposed to that when I was a youngster and my hair was not this color. So we're now dealing with a national lab in California, and um, the California Energy Commission. I'm involved with Building America, and we basically measure, wait for it, 100 houses, and we measure formaldehyde levels and based on ventilation rate, and we find what? That there is no correlation as well. Well, why? Because we repeated in California exactly what Quebec Hydro learned was that because the source strength varied like crazy, if you have a certain ventilation rate, you're going to have different results. And then the argument is, well, okay, let's make the ventilation rate so high that we don't actually have a problem. We just, the problem with that is that that's incredibly expensive, especially in Quebec, because
Right. Yeah.
you got to heat that air, you got to dry that air, or whatever. You have any freaking idea how difficult that is in California? And so the national lab in California didn't want to talk about it. It's even better. I did another study, and we measured 1,000 Building America houses, and we measured, contaminants, and they are all with ventilation systems. And there is no correlation between ASHRAE standard 62.2 ventilation and contaminants. What does that tell you?
I'm not
Dilute,
going to repeat the dilution is not the solution, but what does it tell us?
well, it tells us that all of these people that are sitting on committees and say, okay, we got to ventilate at 20 CFM per person and
Oh, sure.
7.5, are full of shit. That's what I'm telling you. And I say, well, Joe, if you were in charge, and by the way, I used to be on those committees, but I got bounced because apparently I had an attitude problem, but that's another,
I don't see it.
I don't see that. But I said, look, what you should do is we actually have the technology available today to actually measure the contaminants in the space. We didn't have that way back when. But for $1,000, I can measure VOCs and PM 2.5, and I can figure out what it actually is. And then I can ventilate accordingly. Now, the big argument is going to be, well, what's going to be the acceptable and unacceptable number? And we've not yet, even to this freaking day, done the epidemiology to agree on that one.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, and can you imagine the cost involved to do that?
Well, we're going to have a couple of $1 trillion saved because of Mr. Musk, aren't we? We could probably spend some. I got a smile out of you.
Listen, I've been waiting.
I got a smile out of you. Come on. I mean,
No, it's good. I'm with what I've been. So people that know me know that my background, I is in a lot of things, but mechanical ventilation or mechanical ventilation, in whether it's a passive thing or it's a motorized driven thing, has been something that we would recommend in tight, stuffy home. Now, hear me out because I remember your class and all that, but I want to hit one piece of it. So I totally agree about source control. Like, obviously, the first thing to do is don't have the problem in there in the first place. And then the other thing is, if it is in there, can you remove it? Like, I do believe that mechanical ventilation, like filtration, is used and abused when it comes to indoor air quality. Not to say that there's not some numerical benefit, depending on what the metric is and what is it really telling us. But I do believe that you could take a particle counter, for example, and show that, at a smaller micron size, oh, wow, when you turn the machine on, it does lower it. But what I want to ask you is this, and because I actually did a presentation on this, what I'm about to share with you, and I want to see if what I'm about to share with you is different than what you're talking about, because I guarantee you've caught the attention of many people watching, and that's this. This is something that I remember talking about right here, which happened to come from your site, which is nothing. I just happened to do a Google search and just found it there. But this whole ventilation effectiveness tested, I'm assuming these names, or at least one of them, ring a bell. Armin Rudd and Daniel Bergery.
well, Herman is legendary. And
Okay.
And by the way, Armin used to work with us. He used to be one of our partners, and Dan was with one of the national labs, and they're big dogs in my view. They never got the recognition that they should have. Armin, but okay. So the answer is they're both good first class.
Right. And by the way, this wasn't about them, I apologize, but more the takeaways from this particular report about them showing, if memory serves, and I hope I'm not confusing it with another Building America one, but where they showed different methods of ventilation, like exhaust versus central furnace, versus an ERV, and showed how with certain tracers that they were looking at, namely chemical in nature, that there was a reduction. And again, I'm full about source removal. Like, don't put in formaldehyde rich cabinets in your house. Like that's the first thing. But when you can't deal with that, and we do have this issue of, and this is what I want to talk to you about when we're on the course, to be honest with you, but you had so many people in your class, is what do you do when you're in the Band-Aid solution? People aren't going to say, okay, the solution is to rip the house down and build anew the right way, because they can't afford that. Does mechanical ventilation have a place?
Well, absolutely, it does. And balanced ventilation is more effective than exhaust or supply. And balanced ventilation with energy recovery and enthalpy recovery will not penalize you when you have a higher rate. And so um, that's why I said, my new catchphrase is going to be build tight and over ventilate right. You can over ventilate right, a higher ventilation rate with an ERV that's balanced ventilation. And I think
Okay.
if I was in charge, I would make that a requirement of every building code in the United States.
So how does that comment that you just made about overventilate, which sounds sexy to me, how does that differ from the earlier, probably me missing something, of ventilation doesn't work? Because I remember you heard a version of that when you were in the class that you were teaching, which is amazing. And I'm like, wait, am I hearing this wrong?
Okay, so here's the weasel words. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, because we don't know what we're ventilating for unless you measure it.
Fair
And
enough.
dilution is not the solution to indoor pollution if you don't measure.
Your
The
sticking point was the lack of
feedback.
feedback.
Yeah. And people are just guessing at what the numbers should be. And the numbers are so incredibly high that you're actually causing more problems than you're solving.
Mm.
So my I'm actually very positive and looking forward to the next 10 years. Okay. I'm not depressed and unhappy. I'm thinking, well, this is going to be neat. We're going to be actually able to measure stuff reliably and not expensively. And then we're actually going to finally get some of the epidemiology done, and we're going to figure out what a reasonable level of stuff is. And so we're going to ventilate according to what we measure. And if we're really smart, we're going to identify materials that and educate people don't use this, don't use this stuff. I mean, you know, it's kind of dumb to have carpets in hot, humid climates, right?
I love reservoirs for moisture and stuff like that.
No, I'm
Yeah,
just.
off gassing, the acceleration of
No,
other
no, no.
things.
And so, look, I mean, you could, I'm, we have all wood cabinets and they're expensive, but let's say you have a crappy cabinet.
Okay.
Okay. You can paint it with acrylic latex paint and it's no longer going to be off gassing. Duh. You paint it on the inside. Give me a break. We have the ability to reduce the emission rates. We just haven't shared this with the people who need to know, which are called civilians. Yeah, I know. I know. And look, the point here is that I'm very optimistic about what we're going to be able to measure reliably and what we're going to be able to do. And believe it or not, people are not stupid. So I got wood floors everywhere in my house, in our house, and we have basically drywall, but we skim coated all of the drywall with a 1/4 inch of plaster. And that has a huge impact on um, basically capillary condensation and um, adsorbed water and the possibility uh, for for mold growth. Um, I've got old wood furniture, and the new stuff, I put in the garage for 6 months before I bring into the house. I mean,
Okay.
I've I've become that weirdo guy, and but I was
It's only weird if you go and you be a talking head, but if you're trying to err on a qualitative side of caution and go, let's just off gas this little thing. You're not necessarily setting up a chamber
well,
to
but
hit
I'm
a
just
delta and make your beautiful bride feel better about the logic. You're just trying to do what you can.
no, and guess what? We're going to win this with the civilians because civilians love their houses, and it's not complicated. We just need to give them reasonable information. And you're also going to like this, which I think might be a surprise to you, but some of the largest production home builders have got this on their radar, and they want to stay out of trouble.
Sure.
And
Yep.
so they're beginning to pick stuff that doesn't give off stuff.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
we never had to worry about that before, but you see, it's called marketing. You know, not only do we have an energy efficient house, but we're environmentally friendly, and your kids will be smarter, and you're going to run faster, and I mean, you know what I mean.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. Sure.
And this is actually all a good thing. And how could I argue against it? So I go out of my way to help them. And like, you actually talk to them? I thought they were the enemy. No, they're not the enemy. We're actually on the same freaking side here. This is, anyway.
That actually is for me, a beautiful transition into this other piece here that we have, which is people and organizations, I call them code creators, that are in charge of building codes that seem to miss important physics and building sciences. And when I sent that to you, I said, give me examples of the result of that. And you responded, the result of that type of thing is rotting roofs, rotting walls, and mold IAQ type issues. Um, Flex a little bit with that and what you're seeing. What are the issues with codes? Their minimums. They're created by the people that don't really know what they're talking about. What are you seeing, Joe?
Well, I'm saying that the code process is dominated by special interest groups that are funded by other special interest groups. And you don't, you don't have, okay, all of those in favor of violating the second law of thermodynamics on, code change 14.2, raise your hand. I mean, okay, just and 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 so what ends up happening is that we got, special interest groups that are overly influencing the codes. Now, having said all that, there are counter special interest groups that are now paying attention to try to not have that. And so I'm going to say something that people are going to be surprised at saying. Believe it or not, the National Association of Home Builders has actually been insanely responsible. They went from being totally negative about freaking everything to now actually wanting to make sure that stupid stuff doesn't happen. And they're they realize that they're lobbying in a constructive way to reduce risk and problems because it's better for them not to have sick people and not to have buildings that burn and blow away and fall apart. I know you're kidding. Look, the builders associations at first were my enemies, and then they became my friends, and now I respect them. I mean, that's a 40-year journey, all right?
All
And
right.
and so when a builders association, I want to run this code change by you, Joe. What do you think? I drop everything and I will spend whatever time. And then I usually say, well, okay, that's my opinion. You ought to maybe talk to these 4 or 5 other people. And I said, not all of them agree with me. And you need to get this.
Yeah.
What I mean? And so I went from hating the code process to I actually enjoy participating in it. I I'm actually responsible for all of the attic venting requirements in North America, and I actually defined the climate zones, and that came from me. You should ask me where those maps came from.
Okay. If you say somebody else,
Yeah, I stole them from a Russian, a dead Russian, Kopin, and my
Uncle
joke
Gopi in the
that
big movie.
if you're gonna steal something from a Russian, it's better if the Russian is dead. So I took the Köppen climate maps, and basically they became the hygrothermal regions. And so the map of the plant kingdom became the zones to establish the environmental risk of buildings.
Right.
So, you're telling me that plants are more effective at figuring out temperature, relative humidity, and rainfall than architects and engineers. And I says, well, yeah, they've been doing it longer than us.
Yeah. Right. Does this go back to another observation as if we have all these wonderful resources, these principles available? The problem is it's one thing to have it available. It's another thing to be pushed and mandated in regulation. Because I'm sitting here going, why aren't all builders? And again, I don't want to take away from the National Association of Home Builders, but why aren't they? I'm assuming it's a money thing, it's an agenda thing. Are they turning and focusing more on some of these important points to minimize homes falling apart and that sort of thing?
Well, the answer is actually they are, because it's turning out to be good marketing. Let me explain.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice to be a builder now in California to build a house that doesn't burn?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Wouldn't it be nice to, be a builder in the panhandle of Florida that isn't going to blow away during a hurricane and is not going to get flooded with the stormwater surge?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be neat if you're a builder in Maine and Colorado and you have a wildfire that the roof doesn't burn?
Right.
You know? And so, and then wouldn't it be neat that if you are raising a family and you're living in your house and you're homeschooling, wouldn't it be nice if the environment is conducive to, the young kids doing stuff in a healthy way?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
um,
It's way
I,
more appealing to today's citizens
well,
than it was before.
but believe it or not, these builders they're not stupid. All right.
But the burner wasn't that hot when they put their hand on it.
Well,
I do listen. I mean,
I know some of these folks have gotten to be insanely good, and I learned from them, and it's kind of neat. So I went from, again, not liking the process and hating everything to now saying, well, okay, now I understand the process, the code process, marketing, big business, and whatever. And some of the bigger builders actually um, taught me. Um, I got into an argument with Bill Pulte, the original Bill Pulte, once, and I didn't know who he was. And there was a bunch of people, and I says, "Well, you don't know much about buildings," and so there's this gasp, and I said, "What?" And he kind of says, he looks at me, he says, "I like you," and so because I just, I wasn't intimidated by him, but I didn't know that. So he was a real gentleman. Another guy that I became friends with after the fact was David Weekley. So you got David Weekley Homes, Bill Pulte. Bill is, his grandson is now running the company, and I don't know him personally, but I'm going to meet him eventually, and I'm going to tell grandfather stories. And he's Bill had a Bill Senior had a wonderful sense of humor. He just he intimidated a lot of people because they were afraid of him. You know what I mean? And some of these people are really, really good
Yeah.
and good in terms of their talents, but they're also good with their heart. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I I was determined to hate a lot of them, okay? And it turned out that no, they're
I found that to be true. I think some of the greatest people that have been pioneers and mentors in my life, my personal experience is that they really were good at what they do or did, but they were not the best at communicating it in a way to be a teacher, if you will.
no,
Um,
that's absolutely that's right. Now,
yeah.
there are a couple in my experience with were also spectacular, teachers, but they would teach it in an understand it, sleazy kind of a way that would make you learn it. Joe, go to Cleveland, find out why paint is falling off the walls. And
Yeah.
well, you already know why. I said, yeah, I know, but you need to know. Well, why
That's
don't
like
you
a
tell
young
me?
grasshopper thing
Yeah,
going
yeah,
on,
yeah.
right?
Well, you need to know. And I said, well, why don't you tell me? No, you have to learn. Go. Anyway,
Right.
off I went. So that was my, believe it or not, my first real famous paper was called Insulation Induced Paint and Siding Failures. So that
Okay.
was Cleveland, Ohio. And Gus Handegard, he's passed away. Young Joseph, go to Cleveland. Okay.
Right. Some of your best experiences, right? The real world.
Okay.
I have a few rounding up our conversation questions, one of which is very timely. Speaking of builders who like to insulate at the roof line, what is your feeling about non-vented attics in that respect versus insulating at the ceiling line? Is the answer you can do all of it? Do you have a preference and why?
All right. Well, the short answer is that I don't like vented roofs ever because they blow off and they burn.
Okay, yeah, going back to our California conversation earlier. Okay.
Now, here's the problem with that position. In places where it snows, that you're going to have an ice dam issue.
Yeah.
So what I've been doing is I've been putting a vented over roof over an unvented under roof.
Mm,
Vented over roof is to handle the ice dam, and the unvented roof is to handle energy efficiency and
I've seen that
comfort.
with metal roofing.
Well, no, but all I do is um, stand 2x4s on the proud, and I've got a 3.5 inch space on the top of an unvented membrane,
Yeah.
and I've got a soffit vent that I can open and close at it's not a soffit vent, but it's a fascia vent. In other words, the air is introduced behind the fascia. And then at the top, the ridge vent is going to be covered with snow and it doesn't work. So we use a province of Quebec technology. They're called cupolas. So the cupolas rise above.
Sure.
No,
It almost sounds like you described your perfect wall, just put on it sideways.
that's exactly right. Now, the air spaces and whatever to handle this was figured out by another legend who recently passed away, Wayne Tobias. And Wayne was with the Cold Regions Engineering Lab in Hanover, New Hampshire, and he designed all of the DEW line, the distant early warning radar installations in the
Mm,
Arctic.
hmm
Back
hmm
remember when the Russians were our friends, right? Anyway, he also designed the Scott Amundsen station in Antarctica. And so one of the world's foremost people with snow was, a 15-minute drive from where I am. And he kind of adopted me as well. And I so I learned my ice dams from one of the legends of all time in the Arctic and the Antarctic. Wow.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you have actually a digest, a document that's literally titled Ice Dams.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think I call it dam ice dam.
okay. Incredible how many of those you've written. Um, takeaways, there's a few that I want to see if you'd be able to riff on real quick. A lot of people, first of all, I want to say I know that moisture seems to be the real catalyst here, whether it's a off-gassing issue, a condensation, damage to the the assembly, microbial growth, moisture control or moisture management is key. And it's so interesting because in our indoor air quality, we call it indoor environmental quality because it's not just airborne, but when we get into that stuff, moisture is the catalyst. Like people are like, well, how do I prevent mold spores from coming in my home? And it's like, well, you can't. Well, how do I prevent it there from being nutrients in my home? Well, you can't. And it's like, well, what can we do? It's like, well, we can control moisture, and if you control moisture, you minimize these things. So it's interesting to hear a untainted version of in from your lens, which is huge, of how moisture once again is such a catalyst for so many problems, and that we're not afraid to let moisture do what it needs to do. Just don't trap it. Understand the limitations. Where I'm going with this is my audience will have two types of people, which makes total sense. It's going to be the individual that's got an existing home and they're trying to figure out how can we what are the things we can do to check or verify or consider what might be making this house not
Right.
I don't want to say breathing right, but
Look
not
here,
managing moisture.
I want to step back even farther.
Yeah.
I want to say, look, here are the things in order of priority. You want to make sure that the building doesn't burn. So the single most important thing that we learned in the United States and Canada is our fire control. So the first real building codes in the world dealt with fire, all right? You know, the Great Fire of London, the Fire of Chicago, Boston burned the very next year. The point is that we got very sophisticated with fire. And the second thing we added to it, and we're insanely good at it in the United States, is we're dealing with structure. So believe it or not, buildings don't burn and buildings don't fall down and blow away, despite what people like to say. What we're now dealing with is the durability piece, and that's driven by moisture. And so we're now beginning to add the moisture control piece. We have to add it in such a way that we don't damage the existing fire control and structure. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In other words,
So far.
okay. And so after we've handled the moisture piece, we're then going to deal with ultraviolet light and ozone. But that's penny ante stuff. This moisture dance that we're going to go through is going to be at least 20 years. And we're going through it now, and we're, believe it or not, in the United States and Canada, we're actually behaving well and responsibly, and we actually are the world leaders. And the trouble is that the rest of the world is insanely bad and pathetic. I'm like, we used to look to the Europeans for advice, and the answer, you don't want to ask them about moisture management.
Which is probably shocking to some, right? I mean, some people hear that and are like, what? I thought the Europeans were leading the charge.
No. And then you certainly don't want to ask the Japanese or the Chinese and the New Zealanders and the Australians anything to do with moisture management. I'm serious. It's embarrassing. And but you can ask us. I mean, Americans, we're ahead of the curve. And we're actually, this is painful to me to say as an original Canadian, is that we're actually ahead of the Canadians in this, because in Canada, there are only two seasons, this winter and last winter. Here we have Florida and we have Minnesota. All right. So you've got all of the climate zones. The United States is the most comprehensive building that has climate zones that represent the entire planet. We can be, this is going to sound really weird, but we can be planetary leaders in terms of telling people how to deal with the infrastructure that the planet needs. Now, the difficulty of that is that a lot of the advice that we've been hearing from people has been bad.
Right.
Even though we actually have inherent knowledge, we're just not doing a good job of getting it to the people that need to know it. And we're listening to people that we shouldn't be listening to. How's that as a comment?
Pretty serious. If I have Let me throw you a situation. I'm the problem is I'm thinking of your answer already, but I'm trying not to anticipate it. Um, if I have a homeowner who lives in Miami, Florida, existing home, and they say to you, I have a high humidity in my problem and I got condensation happening everywhere. How do they fix that, Joe?
Plug in a dehumidifier, reduce the humidity. Now, before you do that, you should maybe measure what the humidity is. And, you know, I can't tell you one of the most common complaints from some of the that we have with major production builders in Florida and South Texas is that the homeowners are setting their thermostats too low. And
Yeah.
when they lower their thermostat, the humidity goes up.
Right. And the dew point also becomes more of an issue.
Right. And so part of this is to tell them, you don't have your thermostat so low. What are you doing, cooling your house to 68 degrees in the middle of freaking Key West? I mean,
And
what
we
are
see that a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, you're nuts. That's, stop that. The other thing that people are doing is that they're bringing in too much outside air. And when you have a high air change in a mixed humid and a hot humid climate, you're you're you have real problems. And also,
Without naming names, what's your thought about a venting dehumidifier?
if I had any brains, I would have invested in venting dehumidifiers 15 years ago. Remember the scene in the Graduate, the futurist plastics? Like, the future was venting dehumidifiers. Now,
Yeah. Okay.
um, now the other thing is that we need to tell people rationally what should be the relative humidity levels in the building.
Right.
We got people from the medical community that don't understand buildings. And I'm tired of listening to a call-in or reading a New York Times piece or a Wall Street Journal piece. I have to get both of those
You got to
newspapers,
get them both. Yeah. Thank you.
just to show that I'm balanced.
Mm-hmm. Of
Telling
course.
me, what, we have to humidify for health. And no, you don't. Okay. Anyway, so we're not operating our buildings appropriately. We're not educating the homeowners as to what appropriately should mean. And now the production builders are recognizing the issue because they get called in to say, well, how come I got mold here? Well, your thermostat is at 65 degrees, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I-
Right.
and um, now part of this is that they don't have to be at 65 degrees if the windows are better and the house is more energy efficient, right?
Right. Right.
And so part of the marketing is look, you're going to be more comfortable in our house because our walls are built right, our roofs are built right, our windows are right. We've got the right mechanical systems and we're dialing in whatever. And by the way, here's how you should maybe consider running your own, how you should consider operating your house. And this wasn't put together by us, this was put together by this other bunch, right? So because they,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're doing it. Well, why? Because it makes good business sense and it reduces liability.
Yeah.
Well,
The public, at least again, what I've noticed over the years, and I talk about this with a lot of my colleagues, is that there was a time where you could just say as a professional, ventilate, and people, the client, the customer would go, "Ooh, okay, well, this guy, he clearly knows what he's talking about." Or, any other example, clients are becoming more and more educated, and they're, even if they don't know exactly the right question or questions to ask, they're starting to go, well, why are we doing that? Or why are we doing that? And what I keep telling my colleagues is like, eventually you're going to have to be accountable for some of your decisions some of the recommendations you're making. You can't just ride on an idea that was maybe okay 50, 60 years ago, and things evolve. And I think to me, that's why it makes the most sense that what you're saying is that the builders are starting to turn around and go, this is an attractive thing. Like, people are actually into this. And now there's value to be spent, value added to spend the amount of money to do the R&D and that sort of thing. So
Well,
I
actually,
agree with you. I think it's an exciting time.
well, no, but you're right. The builders are seeing that this is a valuable thing to do to establish their credibility, and believe it or not, they get to sell more houses.
Yeah, what a concept. Wow, win-win.
Wow.
Uh, Speaking of new houses, same kind of a question. We know with existing buildings, there's only so much you can do. You start with measuring what your levels are in the first place because maybe we don't have an issue. I know we could get into deeper conversations, but what about the person who wants, I get a lot of these people that say, we want to build from the ground up, but we're afraid to go to our builder because we feel like they're still going to miss a lot of the points that we've kind of talked about. What's your advice, recommendation, resources of how they can minimize some of the pitfalls of poor construction, bad codes, that sort of thing?
Well, believe it or not, there are some pretty good organizations that I didn't used to get along with, but now I'm pretty comfortable with. They don't even know this, but for uh, the local builders associations actually have monthly meetings, and they get together, and you actually, civilians are welcome to listen to the presentations. The architects associations actually have meetings, and civilians, because they're viewed as clients, actually are welcome. There's, each EBA, the Energy Efficient Builders Association, has various whatever. The ones that I really like most are the BECs, the Building Enclosure Councils, and
Oh, okay.
and they love people to come in and listen. I sometimes the local chapters of ASHRAE have meetings, and they're not as how should I say this? They're not as active as I think they should be. I mean, in New England, I love it. I go to the Boston one and I go to the Maine one simply because I like to sit in and listen to stuff that other people are presenting, right? And they say, are you that guy? He says, no, I'm not that guy. I just look like him. I'm killing myself. Anyway, but yeah, and so these small industry trade groups are where if I was wanting to be a homeowner, that's how I'd find an architect or a builder or a contractor that I feel comfortable with.
That's what starts it, right? Like, okay, where do I start? There's no secret sauce. There's no website that says these are the right builders to work with. So
No,
you gotta get into the local community first and say this person sounds like they'd be workable to.
it's all community. It's all community based. That's the way to do it.
Okay,
I
and
so anyway, and they'll be surprised when they realize, well, they're actually welcomed.
I didn't even realize that that was an option, and clearly that could be a good way to start this conversation. What about that individual who is going to whine because they have first world problems and they're like, I want to rely on information that's already available. Let me start off with something obvious. Buildingscience.com has a wealth of resources, maybe too much to where maybe it is overwhelming of which documents do I read, which ones are appropriate. But it would seem like your website, and this isn't prompted, you didn't ask me to say any of this, but it seems like you cover so many of these topics and you have other credible people writing in these documents as well.
Well, but there's like 1,500 documents. Well, which one do you start with, right?
All
What the
right,
heck?
so you're agreeing it's overwhelming.
Well, yeah, and so one of the approaches we've tried, and we're kind of semi-successful, we have an AI program, artificial intelligence program, that you get to ask a question, and it gives you some pretty reasonable references on
On your website?
our website. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Okay. And
we're
then,
we're playing with it, but
yeah, sure.
I'm just saying, but yeah, and then um, I'm not trying to be blatant here, but if you're really serious, sign up for the damn course. You know, that,
Yeah, I agree.
that's, I mean, And you don't have to be an expert. I'm not, you don't have to, there's some terms, but now here's an even better way. Are you telling, and if the partner that I'm married to happily for 33 years finds out about this, I'm going to get into trouble. Are you still there?
I am. I'm pulling up your website while you're
Okay.
talking.
If you pretend to sign in for our class, all of the reading materials and PowerPoints are available for free, not behind a not behind a paywall.
Damn it. You mean I could have got all those documents that I eventually downloaded without taking your course?
That's correct.
Ugh.
For free. Yeah. Now you're not going to get the wit and the humor and
No, that right there is worth.
Steve Brick, as opposed to Lstibruek. I mean that
Yes.
you get that kind of stuff. But yeah, virtually. And so, believe it or not, it gets even better. If you go under recent presentations, every PowerPoint presentation that I've made in the last 20 years is available online.
Why do you do that, Joe? I mean, I could guess, but why do you do it?
Well, because it's my way of giving back. And it's also good marketing. Let me explain. There's always going to be somebody that wants to add, a question. And sometimes, they end up, well, can you design our hospital for us?
Sure, sure.
Well, no, but I know somebody who can do the design for the hospital and we'll do the enclosure and mechanical system review. Oh, okay. Just, that's part of the deal. The more you make available, the more work ends up coming back to us. Now, this is going to sound really weird and you might want to edit it out, but um, we, Betsy and I, we gifted the company to our employees as of January. We're trying to retire. Ask me how well that's gone.
How well has that been going?
All right. So I've gone from 90-hour weeks to 30-hour weeks, and I've gone from traveling 3 days a week to 3 days a month, and I'm actually enjoying it. So
Yeah.
I'm still doing work, but I'm not killing myself. What's been fun to watch is the employees are saying, well, we never had to work this hard before. And I said, that's because we did all of that work. Now you got to do it. I'm sorry. I'm enjoying
You're
watching.
fine. You're fine. Joe, where is your hot, humid climate book at?
I'm rewriting it.
Oh, look at you. Okay.
And same thing with the mixed climate.
Yeah, right.
Right. And so
Okay.
cold and whatever are up to date and they're redone.
Yeah.
In about 3 months, you'll have the worst one that we had was the mixed humid. It was the most complicated, believe it or not. So it's going to be out in about, yeah, probably September. And then the easiest one, the one that was most right, is the hot humid. But I didn't want to reprint it. I want to have it. I want it to look like all of the others. Does that make sense? I know it sounds weird, but
No, whatever. What if it's a quirk thing or whatever? I like it. I like uniformity.
so it's funny. So the the most advanced and the most accurate was the hot humid because it was the last one of the series, right? So I mean, these are they took
Holy cow.
it took 10 years.
This AI thing is pretty cool, by the way. I don't know if you trust it. Have you verified it? Like I just typed in what type of wall system should I build in Miami, Florida, and it included pictures.
Yeah, well, it's actually uh, pretty freaking awesome.
Well,
Um,
so by the way, whether you're a professional or you're just a novice person, this just seems like a great place to rattle off your concerns, and it's a free resource. This is huge, by the way. Okay.
Now, it also has got the A has got a sense of humor. If you ask whether Joe Lstiburek has ever held the Stanley Cup, it'll give you an interesting answer.
Oh God, I'm gonna have some fun with this
Or
later.
don't do that right now. But I'm
Okay, got it. Got it. I won't.
okay. But I'm
Um, and so I just sampled your AI thing because I've actually not I didn't realize you had that, and I get lost in the traditional search where I'll just give up. I just like
yeah.
it's not worth it anymore because it's so much information, like a wealth of data, so that AI kind of at least narrows it down, right, and gets at something. One of the other last questions I have for you, I keep saying that, but is I get a lot of people. In fact, I had one the other day and I reached out to you that they're like, Mike, I get it, free resources, but I have the money and I want to do it right because I care about my home, yada, 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 which is great. They're looking for a person like Joe. In fact, that was the question they asked, well, does Joe still do it? And I think to your retirement piece, you're not, first of all, you're only one man, but second of all, you're not really catering to residential situations as a norm. Is there a recommendation, a resource, a title that someone can type in Google to find professionals that can help them with their new build?
Um, well, here's what I would do is I'd contact the local builders, their local builders association, and ask who does building science or design reviews.
Okay.
The other buzzword is building commissioning, right?
Right.
And
But how
and
do we know how to trust that building commissioning or that sort of thing? I mean, is there things to look for? Like we have things of what to look for with a good inspector and things to avoid. Are there
uh,
things that they should pay attention to?
well, it would be nice. I don't have a good answer because
I
I
put you on the spot. I'm just
I know I don't have a good answer because a whole bunch of those people I think don't know what the hell they're talking about, and then not, and there are also about a third of them that are actually pretty damn freaking good. So
mm,
I don't want to say don't trust them. I'm just simply saying be careful. Two out of three aren't very good, but one out of three are spectacular. And I uh, the local HBA and the local AIA,
mhm.
they're the ones that I would talk to because
Fair enough.
they you normally have good builders at the Home Builders Association, literally, and you normally at the AIA, you got good connected architects. And those are the people that I've always trusted.
Well, and to your point earlier, if someone is really being serious about this and they want to educate, because you end up a lot of people in my situation, the problem is the lack of supply of professionals who are qualified, or what I might loosely term as qualified and capable, is that you're going to be an ambassador for your own journey, whether it's a mold remediation project, whether it's helping build a home. There is some sense of oversight because, yeah, I know of a couple good names in our industry that are great at looking at blueprints and helping working with the builder, but that's great to help 20 or 30 people. What about the rest of everybody? Is to take your building science fundamentals course. I remember, it basically is over 2 weeks. It's 4 days, like a Tuesday, Thursday, but 2 weeks, and it's an all day affair for the most part. And for $595, and that, the rates may change, but it was worth, like, I felt like I robbed you. Like the amount, and I'm not just saying that.
Oh, wait, let me explain. I feel like I'm robbing all of you. So let me explain. All I'm good for is about 4 hours, like so from 1 to 5 Eastern time, and then I run out of gas, and I love it. And so one of the reasons that we limit it to 50 people is I have a big screen. I can see all of you. And a lot of folks don't get it that I can actually see the reactions. And part of
Don't pick your nose and don't be afraid to ask questions because he'll notice both. Before we let you go, I try to ask all of my guests if there were any takeaways. We covered a lot. I know we did a couple of SR-71 flyovers with some topics, and we got into the weeds on others.
rainwater management, rainwater management, rainwater management, rainwater. If you want to save cash, flash, don't be a dope, slope. Then after the rain, you deal with air. So the takeaway is look, handle rainwater, and then after that, be ultra conservative with that. Then you deal with big holes. And when you got rid of the big holes, the small holes usually won't matter. And then, don't overventilate, put in an ERV, and maybe you might need a dehumidifier or humidifier depending on how crazy it is that you're behaving in the building. And you're able, and You should be allowed to be crazy, okay?
Joe, thank you so much for today. Powerful reminder of us of how moisture can influence not just a mold growing on a window or that sort of thing, but really the damaging issues that we're seeing in a lot of the buildings, existing buildings, and not just that, but the blind, almost seemingly blind approach to renovating existing buildings, especially older construction, which I'm running into naturally more and more with remodels and having problems that weren't problems before, and then they became problems. I see that a lot. California, huge. See that a lot of times. So thank you so much for educating our audience, and I certainly look forward to having you on here another time where we can dive deep into another topic if you're willing.
Well, it was an honor and a privilege and a pleasure, and looking forward to getting into trouble with you again in the future.
Right on. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
The content of this show is for informational purposes and represents the sole opinion of the host and its interviewees only. Any reliance on the information provided in this show is done at your own risk. Additional opinions and/or research may change our current view of the topics spoken in this show. We do our best to minimize any inaccuracies presented and make legitimate efforts to back all comments with our own field experience, independent literature, or studies that support the topics discussed. This information should not be used to make conclusive decisions regarding your health or exposure. Ultimately, all questions and/or concerns regarding your health should be addressed by a qualified physician. Additional exposure concerns and/or questions pertaining to the health of your home or building should be addressed by qualified and on-site professionals. Any and all products and services discussed in this show should not be construed as a recommendation, endorsement, or a guarantee that their use is appropriate for your situation. In short, we hope this information is of value to you, but please do not act upon it without actual and individual consultation and guidance by professionals who have taken the time and appropriate collection of data to assess your unique situation.